Hello and welcome to GeekVerse Sidequest, your weekly stop for video game news, reviews, and more here on the GeekVerse Podcast Network. I am your host, the Explorer, Dylan Muss, and today I have with me once again the Spectator, Kirkland Patzer. Last time you were the follower, now you're the Spectator. It's almost like a bit of a theme on Sidequest.
Absolutely. Unintended, but it's maybe like subconsciously I'm making those decisions. No, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here, and so I think it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, so some people on the feed are like, what? I thought there was already a Sidequest episode this week, and that is true. Me and you reviewed Cult of the Lamb and talked about like 100 other games. That was a fun episode.
Yeah.
So let me explain a little bit. Sidequest is a little all over the place right now. So right now we're doing the Curse to Golf review. That's right now, and then next week we're doing opening night live coverage for that, and then later in the week is going to be a Roller Drome review as well. So, 2 weeks in a row, 2 episodes. That's kind of fun. And then it might be a little more chill the next couple weeks after that, and then we're into the freaking season of just games coming out like crazy. Even though a bunch of stuff's still getting delayed, there's still a ton of stuff coming out, so that'll be a fun time. But yeah, we're here to review Curse to Golf today, and I'm going to skip most of the shows. We're just going to get right into it today. It'll be a nice little short and sweet sort of episode. So first of all, thank you to Chuhai Labs and Thunderful Publishing who sent me a review code of this so I could check it out nice and early and have this up on the day of August 18th when this game officially drops. It's coming out on pretty much everything it's on. I'm playing on Steam, but it's also on Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, and it's about $22 Canadian, so convert that to your local currency. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but yeah, Kirkland has not played the game, but he's here to help me out, ask some questions, and when I got to take a sip of water here or there, he can help me out and whatnot. So thank you for joining me in that way.
Of course.
But
thank you.
Let's get into it. So Curse to Golf is a golfing roguelike game. They call it a golf-like, which is a fun way to phrase it. And so, I guess the story hook of the game is essentially that your character is about to be like the best golfer in the world. He's like taking like one final shot. Then he gets struck by a bolt of lightning, gets sent to the underworld, and then of course you meet some like ghastly ghoul type characters where like you gotta fight in the underworld of golfing, and you gotta golf a perfect 18 holes, and then you can make it out and you can go back to life. And I'm guessing once you do that, you can finish that hole that you start the game with. That's like the tutorial. And then that's kind of the story setup there. And so it's a 2D golfing game, which I think that is kind of rare in and of itself. Like I don't know if have you ever played a 2D golfing games? I feel like most of them are, even if it's not 3D graphics, it's like Golf Story or something where it's still 3D environment and 3D interaction, 3D systems and all that.
Exactly. I feel like the most like 2D golf game I have played is just like a top-down version as opposed to like this side scroller. Yeah, what is it considered a side scroller?
I guess so.
Like that,
If you consider the ball is like the platforming character, it's almost like a 2D platformer in a
So
way.
definitely not in this version, but like I've seen that top-down version, but just so many different elements of what make this game like it itself. It just it's a mashup of different genres and things that I never really would have put together, and I think that's also just a really intriguing component of it for myself. When you described it to me, it's like a roguelike golf platformer game, and I was just like, what does this even look like?
I think you could take the platformer part out of it. I thought that was maybe part of it, but it's really just golfing in these 2D roguelike levels. So obviously in the way it's a roguelike mostly is that when you die, when you like lose on a hole and you don't hit we'll talk about the par system and how that works, but when you lose, you get kicked back to the beginning, and then the levels kind of reset, and they're new levels with similar elements, but of course they're roguelike levels as you would expect. And then we'll talk about the golfing too, because even that's quite a bit different from what I'm used to. And I've only ever played one other 2D golf game that I can think of. It was this game called Super Stickman Golf. It was just like a phone game that everyone in high school played this game, and it was great because you could like you would challenge a friend on a certain course, and then like I would shoot one hole, and then whenever they were on their phone next, they could like challenge that same hole. They'd shoot, and then they'd shoot it back to me, and you'd go back and forth. So it was a fun, like easy thing to play with friends when we should have been listening in English class or something like that. And so but it's funny because that game was very over the top and arcadey, and there's power ups and things, which is that's what this game's all about. It's there's a lot of power ups, there's a lot of crazy hazards and things like that on the map. So there you go. There's a brief description of what we're dealing with here. I am paying a pre-release version, obviously, so I don't know if there's a day one patch or something that's intended, but I haven't had really any bugs, no crashes or anything like that. There's a couple visual issues, like certain text things, like there's like a black line that's clearly not supposed to be there, so hopefully that's something that they can just flick a switch and turn that off. It's not a big deal, but yeah, no performance issues or anything like that. It's a pretty simple game, so I don't think it's too intensive on the CPU in that way. There is a demo available on Steam. I don't know about the other platforms, so anyone can go check it out. I don't know how many levels you can play with the demo or how long you can play for, but could be worth checking out. And then, we always talk about a spoiler warning and stuff for these kinds of reviews. I don't think there's much to spoil. Like, it's more mechanical things. Like, that story setup is more or less like the only story beat I've gotten so far in the game. There's a couple characters, but there's not too much to spoil in that way. And then mechanics, I'm going to not try and spoil too much. I don't think I need to get my points across and things like that. Let's see, where do I want to go next? I guess just my overall thoughts. So I'm about 4.5 hours in at this point. The furthest run, which I'm currently on now, and it's each run's quite a bit longer than like a regular roguelike, so you can kind of save mid-run and come back and do it later, which makes sense because golf you would think is a bit slower pace, so obviously these runs are going to be a bit longer. And I think I'm on hole 12, maybe 11 or 12 right now of 18, and this is like I said, the furthest I've gotten. There's kind of different areas, different zones as you're going through it. So I'm on the third zone now of, I believe, 4, maybe a fifth one, maybe like a final boss level kind of thing. So that's where I'm at there. And overall, I'd say it's pretty solid. I think it's a decent golfing game and it's a decent roguelike. And when you mash them together, it's not like those two things mesh together in a way that I think elevates it to some crazy level. It just kind of remains at decent is where I'm going to say. Now, this recent run I'm on now is a lot of fun, but I think there is a few hiccups along the way and some choices that I find a bit strange. And I think maybe if there is one side of that coin that's falling a bit flat, it is, to me, the roguelike elements. Like the randomly generated levels are good, a good variety there and such. But I think that's more or less like the only roguelike element of it that's like going super deep, I guess, and that's where I'm feeling like it's just not reaching the highs of maybe some other golf games or something like that. But I think for people who really like roguelikes and really like golfing games, I think this is awesome. Like, you got to check it out if you are. If you're only a fan of one of those things, then I don't know if I'm gonna put like a huge recommendation on. I think if you're more on the roguelike side of things, I'd say I don't think you need to check it out, but I think if you are a fan of golf games, then I would say it's worth checking out in that way. And I mean, pretty inexpensive game as well.
Yeah.
I mean, these indie golf games, there's quite a few of them out there, but I think this one is definitely carving a cool niche by being a 2D game, which is not too common for golf games.
I think it's fantastic too that it has like a free demo available. I'm definitely gonna be checking out that demo just because it's such like a wacky, like, again, mix up of different games all together that it's like
mashup.
And like, because it is so bizarre from something I'm used to, I feel like there is a chance that I might just really not like it. So it's nice that it has the demo. But like, I mean, like the trailer that I watched for the game, it definitely had me interested more so just like the power-ups and just that concept of like trying to get that perfect golf game, because that's always the goal when you're playing golf, is to do it as best as you can, obviously. But I don't know. I feel like this is a really fun take on just like that golf genre, whereas it is simplistic, but I don't want to say simplistic in a way being like, oh, it's just like easy, because there obviously
definitely
has
not
like
easy.
its own,
I'll tell you that.
it definitely has like
wrecked sometimes.
It's complex like side to it, but I think it's just so unique in that sense where like the roguelike element. I think that's the thing that just it has me really curious, honestly, is like what is making it different on each run there. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts on that.
We'll get into that shortly. I just want to quickly side note zoom out a bit and just talk about the aesthetics a little bit. So I mean, visually it's kind of your pixel art style, and like picture like a Shovel Knight or something. It's kind of in that style, I would say. And I think it looks great. I think the characters are all very expressive. The character art is what stands out to me the most. But the levels, it's simple, but I think for a roguelike where you're going to be mixing and matching it, you want to keep it simple so that it works well, and I think they have succeeded there. The backgrounds have a lot going on, and it's very easy to tell what's in the background, what's in the foreground, which you could think like, oh, is this tree in the background? Like, am I going to hit that? And like, it's very clear what you're not going to hit and what you are. One thing I love too is you're often going to a shop as you're progressing through these levels, and you can just go in there and change your costume at any point, and there's just like 16 different palette swaps that you have access to, like from the very beginning. So I like that. Most games you have to unlock that stuff or use your in-game currency to buy it, but instead you can just swap to anyone you want at any point, pretty much. And I like doing that. I've swapped around a few times. You could even kind of pair it up with the region you're in. Like maybe there's I'm gonna use this nice pink one in the caves. Like that looks pretty cool. So that's fun. And one thing too, just a little thing in there that I love, these little details, is if your character, if like your ball is, I guess, right near a ledge, and therefore when you're going to hit it, you're right on the ledge. I don't think it affects your shot accuracy at all, but your character's kind of like teetering on the edge.
Oh, that's
in
fun.
a really cool way, like kind of like in Smash, if you're on the edge, your character like does this little like they're in the wind kind of animation. So I really like that touch. So visually, it's great. I really like it. And then the sound effects are all good and solid. And I'm really liking the music too. It's very arcadey. Fits that like very classic kind of indie game music soundtrack that you think of. A lot of it feels very like almost homage to Celeste, which I mean, Celeste is one of the very best game soundtracks of all time. It's not copying that by any means, but there's definitely a few themes where I'm like, this is giving me Celeste vibes in good ways. So shout outs to the music there as well. So yeah, let's now get into some of the mechanics. So Kirkland, what do you want to hear about more? Do you want to start with the golf mechanics or the roguelike? Because I want to break it up and kind of talk about each of those elements on their own, and then we can kind of fuse them together later and talk about how they work alongside each other.
Let's start with the golf mechanics, because like at the bare bones, this is a golf game.
Yeah.
he's swinging at the ball. So I'm very intrigued on just how much it has that golf feel to it, as opposed to just being like an arcadey golf style. Is it trying to like really stay true to that golf genre, which is kind of weird because golf is a bizarre sport in that sense. But yeah. So I guess in terms of, it definitely is way on the arcadey side of things instead of like the sim element of it. There's a few just like basic things you'd think of, like wind is not. Most golf games have like a wind meter at the top. Yeah,
that affects your shots. There is a wind like hazard on certain stages. Like there's these cursed levels you can go to, and they have extra hazards. And there's like wind one there, but that's not like just a basic mechanic in the game. One thing that's like very different, I would say, is that you only have 3 clubs in this game. You have your wedge, so if you're stuck in the sand, you can use that, or it goes more vertically than the other ones. You have the driver, which is just for long shots, and then you have an iron, which is in between. And there isn't like different ones. There's like a 5-iron, 4-iron, whatever it is. In this, you just get those 3. And as far as I can tell, you don't unlock any more. So it is, I would say, like a pretty core system in that way. Like there's not going to be a lot of variance in terms of, like, you would think if, okay, a roguelike golfing game, I bet you're getting all sorts of different clubs and that affects how you're hitting shots, but that's not the case here. They didn't go down that route, which is interesting. And you might have noticed that I didn't mention the putter. There is no putting in this game, which I'd say I'm mixed on, because I think that's always one of my favorite parts about golf experiences. And I love mini golf too, so to get that idea in there would seem cool for a roguelike. But yeah, there is no putting, and I think part of that too is that the hole that you're hitting it in is fucking huge. Like, it's like, picture how big your character is, like when they're standing there hitting the ball. It's like 2 character lengths wide. Wow. Like, it's a really, really big hole, and it also has this weird thing to it too, where like, because it's big, you would think, okay, that would be scary because your ball is going to often bounce out. But as soon as you get the ball in it, it just like takes away all the gravity. Like, if you get anywhere inside of the hole, it instantly sinks it in that way. So I think with those changes, it takes away the necessity for a putter, but it still is maybe a change that you're not necessarily used to in a golf game. I can't think of any golf game that doesn't have a putter as a basic option. So once again, like maybe there's a upgrade for that, or a special like temporary move, or maybe you unlock it at some point. But I think just based on how these levels are designed, I don't know if a putter really fits in there. And maybe I'm sure they tried it at some point and ultimately decided somewhere in development, like, the putter's not adding to the game in any way.
Right.
So let's take it out. It'd be a little bit different. So
I could definitely see like that decision there, because just from the videos that I've seen, like I feel like if you just get to a point where you're just so close to the hole that you would just put it in, like it wouldn't feel like you need power ups for that at all. Especially like as you described, once it's in the hole, like once it gets basically in the hole, it's in the hole. So you're not too worried about like overshooting it there.
Yeah.
And it also just seemed like there's a lot of emphasis on just getting these really wacky shots of so I can definitely understand it for all the reasons that you kind of like laid out there. But it is weird to just not have a putter in golf, and like you, I love mini golf. It's so iconic, and I just feel like even like Wii Sports like golf, like I always just loved when I got that close where I could use the putter, because it's a different part of golf, like from everything else, right? Like everything else, like you're really swinging. It doesn't matter if you have your wood club, your irons, like you're still really swinging it, where the putting is a completely different game. But I can understand the decision there, especially because like what power ups would you really get from using the like the putter there?
Yeah, I guess it would potentially slow the game down a bit too. And like usually when you're anywhere even like halfway close to the hole, it's like very easy to get that last shot in. So it just changes the flow of the game, right? Where it's not like, okay, I'm going to spend, let's say 3 to 4 hits to get to the flag, and then, another 2 to 3 hits to get the ball in. It's like if you're close to it, you're going to very easily get it in there because it is so huge, and you can be pretty precise with it in that way. And I guess also worth mentioning is there's no flag. Like there is one there visually, but it's in the background, so you can't like get a bank shot off the flag, which you have iconically done before.
My iconic shot, yes. Thanks for bringing that up. I got to get like a tattoo of that moment or something. Like that is just like the highlight of my Wii career, I would say.
Yeah. So the other huge change for me from any golf game I've ever played is how you're selecting your shot. So pretty much in every game I've ever played, you can take all the time in the world you want to plan out where your shot's going to go. You can like zoom out or zoom in, whatever it is, and really pick where you want to go. You're looking at the wind, you're looking at the the slope on the hills and things like this, and trying to plan out that perfect shot. And then it's really about, okay, that's where I want to hit it. I want to hit it this hard. And then the timing part of it is like, can I hit that power meter just right? And in games like Mario Golf, like if you have a chance that you can just hit it the wrong way, or in like Wii Sports, if you just swing in a weird way, like whatever, the bar goes all squiggly and then your shot's not as accurate. So there's that element of it. So the skill kind of comes with 2 ways. One, just like strategically planning out what you should do, and then the execution part of it. So it's a lot different here because you are first picking your power, and it's like a bar that goes up and down. But the weird decision for me is that you can just like cancel it out and do it again. So you can pretty much choose exactly how much power you want, but you can't it doesn't let you pick on the meter where you want to hit it. But at the same time, you can just keep canceling it with no penalty whatsoever and just keep trying to get. And so oftentimes it's like, okay, I want to get this very precise amount, so I just keep canceling it until I can get that bar just right. And like I said, there's absolutely no penalty for doing this. So it seems like kind of a weird decision for me to have that. And then the other side of this coin is that so that you can get your power, let's say, exactly as you want it, exactly precise. But then where the shot goes, it's like this, this kind of arched like line indicator where your ball is going to go, and that goes up and down. So that's your skill thing, is you have to get the timing right of that, and you can't redo that if you miss it. So that seems fine, but to me, where the potential problem with it is there's no way to like zoom out, or you can't move your camera at this point. So if you're using your driver or something, you just can't see like where exactly your ball is going to go. So you can like scout it out beforehand and try to assume, but you're not going to be able to see exactly where that arch goes. So
I see.
I don't know. That makes sense? Because it just feels weird that you can take all this time in the world to get your shot exactly precise in that way, and mostly get it precise with the aiming, but like on the power at least. But then you just can never really see exactly where your ball is going to go on a longer iron shot or like a driver shot. So it's a bit of a weird disconnect, I got to say. And I think that's, to me, where that's really the one spot where when the golf mechanics fall a bit short, is it just feels like, why are you making me play this mini game to get my power correct if I can just do it 100 times over to get the exact amount? Why not just let me pick? It just kind of slows the game down a bit, I guess.
Yeah, it is kind of strange that it seems like they made that decision to make it like you can kind of just choose the option that you want to go, like, or let me rephrase that. You can just keep redoing like the initial portion of it, but then you can on the other side. So it's like they didn't really like fully commit on that decision of making it challenging on that regard or making it very forgiving in that regard. And I feel like, yeah, like the camera, I always complain whenever I'm just not able to see things like on a game. I always want to like just visually be able to see that stuff. So that would probably bug me like quite a bit, but maybe it's one of those things where you just gotta have to like really plan like before you go into that action. And but
because sometimes there's like a really precise thing off screen where there's spikes and water and you're trying to get in that hole in between.
Yeah, that would be frustrating.
And it just kind of sucks that you can't really plan for that. So instead you're just like, okay, well, I guess I'll take a bonus shot to get just a bit closer, and then I'll use one when I can get a bit closer. So I think the game flows the best when you're doing a bunch of mid-range shots where you can see exactly where they're going to go, and you're just using your iron. It's more about like, okay, nail my power, get my precision right, and just keep going after and after. But if you have a lot of drives in there and you're trying to be precise with it, it gets a bit scary, and it doesn't feel like a good challenge. It just feels like, let me move my camera over, please. Like it can be a little bit frustrating. So
I was gonna say, especially since it seems like there's a big point of emphasis of getting like those perfect runs. So like, again, just not having the full tools at your disposal to just see like what you're doing. I feel like that could definitely get frustrating, especially if you're just trying to like perfect like a certain course or whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and then okay, so that's there. You can also add spin to your balls. This is nice because you can do it at any point. You can do it like at the very start and get it preemptively, and you kind of do it by picking it like a side, left or right, and then just like mashing a bunch essentially. And you can sometimes get like, you can add some spin to click it to the left, and then before it lands again, kicks it to the right, and you can kind of move it around. It's a bit awkward to control at first. It took me a few holes to get used to it, but once I really like the precision of it. And I like how you can do it last minute and wait and see like, okay, once again, if you're doing a long drive, you don't know exactly where your ball is going to go. You can wait until you see where it's going to go before you choose where you want to add the spin. So that works well. And then, one thing that I feel like I'm maybe just missing something is that there's oftentimes, because these are very arcadey, weird levels, and there's ledges above you and stuff, it's really hard to get your ball very high up because your wedge is the only club that hits the ball really upwards in a like a, I don't know, I guess I'll say like above that 45-degree angle kind of thing.
Right.
But it's pretty weak. Like you can't hit it that far. So there's oftentimes just things above you that you just can't really get to unless I suppose you have a couple of the specific power-ups. But especially like I just feel like of the most common power-ups that you're getting, ones that would get your ball a lot higher, I've not really seen. Like there's maybe, I found a portal. That's kind of fun. You can set 2 portals down. So like that could work, but even then it's a bit limited because you can only put the portals within a certain range of your character. So that's one thing that seems like a bit of a strange thing, because sometimes it's like, okay, if I miss this shot, I'm too far now. But other times it's like, how was I ever supposed to get up there? Is that a weird level generation thing in the roguelike thing? Or is that intentional? Is it because they want this to be a huge reward if you do have those very specific powers? Because I know there's like a rocket ship power. You turn your ball into a rocket and you can't aim around. But I've seen that once in the shop, but it's really expensive. And then I've never like actually used it. So I don't know. There's weird cases like that. So maybe that's worth bringing up. And then, yeah, so let's talk about the par system is a bit different here. Most golf games, okay, you're aiming for a par 3. If you get more, it just adds score, and then you get a worse score. But in this, you start at the level with, let's say, 5 shots. So you have 5 shots to get to the flag. And that might seem like a lot, but these levels are pretty huge. We'll talk about that in the roguelike part of this. But, yeah, you get that 5-shot counter, and each time you take a shot, it goes down. If you hit like a water hazard or a graveyard or something like that, it will bring that score down too, so you get a -1 on top of your shot. And then there's ways to add that number up. 1, there's power-ups to do that. And then 2 is there's idols scattered around the map. There's gold and silver idols. And so this part I actually really like, because it kind of is like, okay, how can I get closer to the flag, get closer to my objective, while also hitting an idol on the way? Sometimes you'll maybe have to go out of your way, do a bit of a different route, and it could be worth it to get that gold idol. Other times it might not be worth it, and it's like, okay, I'll just skip this idol, even though it's somewhat on my way, to get a bit closer to that flag. So I think the idols work really well. The shot system in general, I I think it's okay when we get to the roguelike part and we talk about a certain card system. I'll talk about where I think it kind of falls short a little bit. But I think it's interesting system for what this game is, and they probably had to do something different in terms of the par system to make it a roguelike so that you're dying and losing, and that seemed like a good way to do it. So I think they've kind of succeeded in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing that in the trailer, and obviously not all the details that you just laid out, but just like collecting those little idols where you would gain like certain shots or whatnot.
It's very satisfying to see it just explode when you smash it with
Oh,
the ball.
absolutely. You get that dopamine rush. And I feel like in this type of game, it's so fitting to have those little elements of like, yeah, you're trying to get to the goal, but then if you are really like min-maxing or like trying to just be an overachiever, like hit this along the way, but also if it gives you more shots, it might even just make it easier because then you have a couple more chances in that regard.
Yeah. And I mean, there has been times too where just hitting these idols, I'm up there at like 7, 8, 10 shots. So it almost makes it trivial at some points where it's like, there's no way I can lose this level, which, maybe is good to have a balance of some hard levels mixed with some easier ones. But worth putting that out there at least.
On that note, I was going to ask you, is there like a difficulty setting on this, or is it just the standard difficulty?
Yeah, no difficulty. As far as I can tell, it seems like, let's say there's maybe 4 or 5 holes in each of these zones, and it seems like as you go through that, each level is getting harder in each zone, and then it almost resets a bit. When you get to the next zone, the first level is pretty easy going, but then 2, 3, 4 get quite a bit harder as you're going along. But yeah, no difficulty setting. Which I guess is actually pretty common for roguelikes. I feel like a lot of roguelikes... maybe not. Maybe it's 50-50. I just feel like... I'm thinking of Spelunky, which obviously does not have a difficulty setting.
I'm thinking of Loop Hero. Is that considered a roguelike, or is that just a basic like
Oh, it's in there. That game has like 100 genres. It's like, pick any of 100 genres and you're close. Exactly. So, okay, let's talk about some of the roguelike elements of it. So the main thing being... really, I guess it's a roguelike in 2 ways for me. It's the randomly generated levels, so we'll get into the depths of that. But then it's the permadeath. And there is a bit of a roguelike-y element to it where you can, your card power-ups, you can put them into your binder, and then that would carry over to the next run. But it's a bit weird because you'd have to do that before the level that you are about to lose on. So, usually you'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to keep all my cards to beat this level, and in the off chance that it's a really hard level or I mess up and I lose, then those cards are gone. But it's like, should I have risked by putting my cards away? Like, I don't know if that's very successful of a choice in terms of like as a player's decision of a roguelike element. Like, I guess if you have a bunch of extra TNT and you don't need 5 of them, you could stock 3 of them away. Maybe that's more the idea, but it's a bit strange. I will say.
I feel like just speaking for myself, I feel like if I was in that situation, I probably just wouldn't even bother like using them if I have to like actually like plan it before the level that I think I'm gonna lose on. It's just like, well, maybe it's just like the min-maxer in my heart that's like, I don't need this. I can make it through without this.
I was feeling that way too, and then I died a bunch in the first area, and I'm like, okay, I gotta be greedy here. Yes, I want to save these, but you can get so many rewards stockpiled at some points that like don't be shy. Use your power-ups if you're scared about something. Okay, so talking about some of the level generation, I feel like so far there's actually a pretty good mix between the zones where the first area to me is much more like these right angles. It's very blocky. The second zone adds slopes, like these sandy slopes. So even just like that little change adds a lot to the level generation. The third area, which I've only done a couple levels on now, I haven't experienced much of it, but it seems like good variety there. So I mentioned this earlier. The levels are very big. Sometimes I feel like they're a bit too big, where each level takes a bit longer than you'd want it to for a roguelike. I don't know how strongly I feel about that point. I'm just throwing it out there. Some of these levels get massive, and you can like zoom out and look around at all of them, not when you're shooting, but when you're planning for your shot. And sometimes it's like, man, I have no idea like how I'm supposed to get to this flag. I'm just going to hit the ball a few times until I'm a bit closer and I can conceive it all. And sometimes it can be very mazy too. There's like ways that your ball will teleport around or get moved around the map. And so it can just be almost impossible sometimes to know like what your route should be. So it feels a bit weird, but at some time, like, at the same time, some of these levels, going through them and the maze-like elements of it make it very fun. So I think it's just one of those things. Random generation, some of the levels are going to be better than others. That's just naturally going to happen.
Yeah, I was gonna ask on this because I was on thunderfulgames.com on the website,
Nice.
like, and they were talking about like the key features of the game, and in there I saw it said 80 plus holes, and then the daily challenge
Mm.
mode, which will keep you swinging for eternity, and the
Daily
80.
challenge. I was gonna mention that because I don't see it anywhere in the game. I wonder if that's
Oh,
like
okay.
day one and they're gonna put it in there or something. But
Yeah,
I'm excited for
perhaps.
that actually, or maybe it's
Yeah,
a feature down the road or something.
I could definitely see it being released like when the actual game releases, if they're like
Hmm.
implementing them from day one. But the 80 plus holes there I saw, I feel like if I'm just imagining like a randomly generated level, I'm not gonna say infinity, but like probably more than 80
Yeah,
possibilities
that
there.
makes me wonder if they did hand make each level and then you're just randomly getting given each ones, which at that point it's not even really a roguelike anymore. That's like kind of
Yeah.
a different thing. So I'm curious about that. I haven't there's a couple levels, like I think a specific boss levels are set from what I've noticed.
Okay.
I could be wrong, and there's like little changes perhaps, but yeah, I'd be curious. Like I haven't noticed a duplicate level yet. They
Okay.
they do feel largely samey in a way, but
Yeah.
once you get used to a certain area, you're kind of plugging through them quick anyway. I don't know if you'd notice these individual details, or maybe it's like the level structure is the same, but then like there's a couple different tubes, or the idols are in a different spot.
I see.
Maybe that's where
Yeah.
some of the roguelike elements come in.
And then, like, if we're going off this information here, and let's just say that there is less than 100 total holes, is it a type of game that you could like totally foresee like a DLC pack or something that just includes a lot more levels? I understand that there is like the story that you have to accomplish of like getting through all the 18 holes, but like so like that is like the set story, but beyond that, is there just room for something like that, like it just including, or is it just like a
Yeah,
free map pack or something like that? I don't know how they would do it.
I would like to see that. Uh, I have a thought on this that I want to save for a bit later, so I'll put it
Okay,
that way.
yeah,
But
fair enough.
I will say I think the daily challenge will add one, just like that competitive element to it of comparing yourself against your friends or just other people online. I don't know
Right.
if there'd be like maybe speed run comparisons or just your score objectives, or like this guy used no items so he gets a bonus. Like I just that kind of stuff I think could add some good variety to it. But yeah, I'm curious about this point now too, because I did not really realize that there's perhaps a limited amount of levels. In which case, yeah, like is this really a roguelikey game? I guess not so much in that way. So I guess I mentioned this too. So we just played Cult of the Lamb. We talked about this. How when you're going through your crusades, and when you finish like a combat level, you kind of have like 3 or 4 paths you can go on. You
Yep.
can go up here, get some wood, or you can go up here, do another challenge, that kind of thing. So this game somewhat has that. It's much more basic in that sometimes you'll just get to a fork in the road, and that's as complicated as it gets, and then it will come back together. And so, I mean, the main thing here is that you can choose to go down a more difficult path, so you get a couple of rewards, but then you have to play a harder level. And on these harder levels, they're called cursed levels, and that's where you have some features that get added in there. So like I mentioned, the wind, or maybe the ball is super bouncy, which could be a problem, or sometimes you can get like a big ball, so it's just way heavier and it doesn't like bounce at all. Or if you put spin, like the spin does nothing.
Is it like a soccer ball size, or is it like an over like a hamster ball, basically like a human sized hamster ball? Like how big? How big are we talking?
I think the basic ball is like 4 pixels, and this one's like 12 pixels or something,
Okay.
or 8
Not
pixel.
bad.
I don't know. It's like it's a chunkier ball.
Over
It's
double,
definitely not a
at
soccer
least.
ball though.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes these bigger levels have multiple holes on them, so you can have flags, holes, whatever you want to call it. So different like objectives you could go to. Usually they're about the same length as far as I can tell, but there's a little bit of player freedom there, and oftentimes it's like you can go the low road, you go the high road, and stuff like that.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
If you really want to like, oh, I just want to go high here, or like if you're just, I'm gonna go for the easy route and go for the
Yeah.
let gravity take my ball
Different-
down to the lower field.
Different like rewards and such spread around
Oh,
them.
okay.
So
Is
yeah,
it like
you
the-
can kind of pick
Sorry,
and choose?
Yeah, you mentioned different rewards. Like, is one hole more valuable than the other because it might be harder to get to? I know you said that there are pretty even in that regard,
No,
but is
I-
it more
I
like
w- I just
rewards
mean in,
on
like,
the way to the hole?
I think I just mean in terms of like where idols are. Like this one
Oh, okay.
might be like, okay, this golden idol is much more, on the critical path. Whereas if I go
Right.
up top, it's like I have to go down this other random hallway to get to
I
a golden
see.
idol, so it wouldn't be worth it. That's what I mean there. So in terms of the hazards, I'll just mention a couple because I don't think I really need to spoil a lot of these to get my points across here. I think there is a good mix of them, just like I mentioned, like the basic water and spikes and things like that. The one I really want to shout out is this kind of bouncing pad where you hit the ball into it, and then your ball bounces off, and then it goes slow-mo for a bit, and then you can aim in any direction and right-click, and it will launch the ball in that direction, which is just super fun, especially if it's like near the hole in the end, so you can like ricochet it off a wall and like aim it in. But then oftentimes what they'll do is they'll just have like this long cavern that just has like 100 of these. So you're like shooting your ball once, you're bouncing off these walls, avoiding spikes, bounce, bounce, bounce. Each time you hit another wall, you get another right click shot. And like those are that's like the highlight of the game for me. These moments where it's very fast paced because like that slow-mo only lasts for a certain amount of time. So you still have to, it's almost like a quick time event in a way. You got to be very fast with it. And it's like, it is exhilarating every time. And anytime I like have multiple paths and I see one of those routes, I'm like, I'm going that way for sure. Cause I just want to do that. It's so much fun.
I don't know why, but when you described it, like going off this little ricochet path, and then it goes slow-mo, and you can kind of redirect it, my mind just goes to the roller drome like gameplay video in a certain way where they're like doing flips, and I don't know if it specifically goes slow-mo because I haven't played the game yet, but with the way you're describing it, I'm like, this is what I'm visualizing right now, but it would just be in golf ball
Wrong
form,
game,
so that's kind of funny.
And then the other one I'll mention is just like there's teleporters or tubes, which are more or less the same thing, where you hit your ball into a teleporter, pops out the other side. Then another thing is, once again, on these mazy levels, sometimes there'll be like 3 or 4 sets of teleporters. You can know which one. There's like a green side and then a red side, so you hit it in green, it pops out the red.
Portal
but you
rules
don't
right
know,
there.
yeah, but you don't know which one goes to where. So that can be very confusing. I've had a couple levels where I'm actually like going back and forth, like through tubes over and over again, like just looking for the way to go. So it's almost like a Castlevania sort of game in a way or something like that, which is interesting. Is that it almost feels like those are kind of like puzzle levels, but since you only have a certain amount of shots, I don't know, it's like a weird challenge where sometimes you almost feel like you're getting boxed out, but at the same time, when you finally do make it to that right path and you're like, okay, now I just have a couple more shots to hole, feels pretty good. So, and once again, one thing I really like about that is when I think about mini putt, one thing I love about mini putt, or think about Scandisk specifically, oftentimes you can see that there's a couple different spots you could hit the ball, and then the tubes pop out somewhere, but you don't know which one goes where, and that's always like a fun thing with mini putt. So I feel like that idea, even though there's no putting in this game, is brought into this game through these tubes, and so I got to commend them for that, because that's a cool touch that I really appreciated.
I was gonna bring up that exact same example actually, that has a very mini putt element to it, because totally there is like moments where there's 3 tubes and you don't know where it's going. It's like, I think this one's right, and it goes like the complete opposite way. It's like, you chose poorly.
So in terms of the roguelike element, one thing that I'm gonna be maybe a bit critical of is the progression system. So I mentioned those paths. So you have those decisions, but it's pretty basic, and it's pretty much always the same kind of decision. Like, do you want a harder level with a bit more reward, or do you want to go to the easy way? That's
right.
as interesting as the decisions get, which is not that interesting. And as you're going along, you're getting money from each level. Once again, that's something on the track you can pick. Okay, I'm going to go to this place, get more money. If you see a shop coming up, that kind of thing. And pretty much the only progression in this game, like I said, there's no different clubs, there's no stats that you're leveling up. It's all through these cards. So you're buying these cards that are essentially just like a one-time consumable that you can use. As I said, you can progress them over to a future run, but then there's also like no limit. You can just have an infinitive amount of them. And these are things like, one of them is just a card that gives you adds more shots onto your par thing. So if you start at 5, you just can add 2 on there. That one, I mean, it's a lifesaver, but I also feel like it's a bit of a cop-out for this like balance of the game, where like this could be a very hard level, but because I just have a bunch of cards saved up and I can add an infinite amount of shots, it takes away any sort of consequences to playing poorly in a way. And obviously it's like, well, you don't want to use them because you want to save them for future levels, but then inevitably you're always going to have to use them on a level. So I think it messes with the balance in a way and makes the game, which is way too easy at times. And I guess it could also be a luck thing too. If you're just unlucky in your card draws when you're opening packs and you don't get any of those, then you could be kind of screwed. So I think that's maybe one thing I'll be critical of, but other cards would be, something like a lead ball. So when your ball hits the ground, it just doesn't bounce at all, which can be really useful at times. I mentioned the portal one, or you can do practice shots or a mulligan, things like that. And once again, I don't want to spoil tons of them. The one I will is a lot of fun is where you hit the ball into the ground and then it starts burrowing through the ground and you can like direct it in any which way.
I saw that in the trailer, actually.
Yeah.
That one looked really cool.
That one's super fun. I really, really like that. That's a lot of fun. So yeah, that's kind of your only progression in the game is getting these cards and then using them. One little critique I'll have for the cards is the way they're organized. Is it's like when you pull them up to use them in a level, and there's no limit, you can just spam them as much as you want. It's like you always just have one on your screen. You're kind of like sifting through them one by one, and there's no like organization to it. It's like for example, those cards that give you like +2 to your par, +3, +6, whatever it is. Like those aren't necessarily next to each other, so you kind of have to like scroll through all your cards to say, okay, what do I have here?
Yeah.
It's a bit hard when you get to like, okay, I have 15 different cards and I have multiples of each one. It's very hard to quickly see what you have as like a grand total of each card and stuff like that. So that's one thing I would say against it.
It's kind of annoying when like I come across that in just other games because I feel like it's a pretty easy thing to implement. It's just like an organized, like even just a sorting tool, or just like organize like similar type cards like in that order. Yeah, just makes it easier for the user, right, to navigate through that stuff. Yeah.
So when that's your only progression system in the game as a character, getting better, I guess it makes it feel that each run feels pretty much the same, where you might get a different, combination of cards. Maybe I have 4 TNT cards and 2+2 cards in this run, and then the next one I have different quantities of those. So it makes each run feel a bit samey, and we talked about how there's maybe a certain amount of levels, but either way, like the level variety is pretty good, but then that's like the only thing that's changing. And so I guess what I'm saying is it can make going through that first area, like if you lose a run and have to go through that first area again, the game can feel like a bit of a slog at times. Like I almost wish there was a checkpoint so I could always start from the sand level once I've gotten past that first area. There is a one-time checkpoint system you can do each run. You can put a checkpoint down at some point. So usually I'll put it down right before a boss level before I go in there. But I don't know, you can only do that once. And once again, it's like the card thing. It's like, well, I always kind of want to save this until it's too late. I don't know. It's kind of a weird decision thing with that.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's maybe my criticism with that part of the game is that just the progression doesn't feel great. So now that we've talked about those things, talking about how they kind of meet with each other, I think that's one thing for me is while I'm enjoying the experience and it feels like there's a decent amount of variety and the golf mechanics are decent, I think this is a game that once I've golfed that 18, I think I'm good. Like I think I'm ready to put it down at that point. I don't know if there's enough there to keep me coming back. Now, I was going to suggest a daily challenge would be a great way to do it and only if the daily challenge is done right where it's not too long, because golfing 18 on these long big levels that you are pretty hard, so you want to take your time to make sure you're thinking. Like if that takes 2 hours or 3 hours for a run, like I'm not going to, like a daily run needs to be potentially very short, Yeah. I want to be able to get through it in like 10, 15 minutes, and I don't know if the game is built for that. Now, I think a good solution would be if the daily challenge is one level from each of the presumed 4 areas. I think that would work great. You just get a mix of each of the level types. You go through them, get through it in whatever it is, 15 minutes or something like that. That would be perfect. So I'm excited to see what that is. You mentioned it's on the website, but yeah, it's like it's not even on the menu and grayed out or something. Like I just don't see it at all. So I don't know if that's a day one patch or if that's something they plan down the road. But I will keep my eye out for the daily challenge for sure, because I love me a good daily challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And just I feel even just the vibe that I'm getting from this sort of game is it should be something that you kind of just jump in, and if it is a daily, like you're not just stressing for 2 hours to just get through this daily, because the idea is you're coming back every single day. I think if like obviously they want people to play their game, but to force like that much commitment just to get through a daily challenge, I feel like it would have the opposite effect where it would probably deter people away from wanting to really just come through on all those daily challenges. And I'm curious to find out just what the reward would be for a daily challenge, right?
I think like, most games just have it as pride, right? Like, if you get there's been a couple times, I'm going to brag here, that I've gotten number 1 on that Spelunky 2 leaderboard on the daily challenge. That shit feels amazing. Oh, yeah, that's fair. I'm the best Spelunky player in the world today. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Like, count me in.
You're just like riding high all day. Like you're just ready to take on the world.
It feels amazing. So
cool.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting mix up of genres because I feel like both roguelikes and golf games are generally games that are known for being very replayable because there's this level of mastery to it. With a roguelike, it's like getting better and better at the game, so you can beat that boss every time.
Right.
Or maybe there's certain challenge areas that you can get to, and just replaying over and over again, getting so good at those mechanics. And golf games, it's kind of similar too, where usually it's the same courses over and over again, but you're learning the ins and outs of how they work and getting to a point where, okay, I can crush this in 2 shots every time because I know exactly what to do, and things like that. So I think it is an interesting combination in that way, that they're both games that generally facilitate mastery through replayability. But as I said, I don't know if there's enough variety there for me for it to work. It's not quite perfect because those golf levels aren't always the same in terms of getting that mastery down, and the roguelike levels might not have quite enough variety to them to want you to keep coming back. So I don't know. I think once again, if like I'm at 4.5 hours now, if it takes me another up to 8, 9, whatever it is hours to get that completed run, like that's amazing. Like that's a great length for a game. I got my money's worth.
Price point,
I'm happy
right?
with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that too. It's just something you wouldn't normally associate with a roguelike game. So yeah, I think the couple things suggestions or thoughts I had was, one, just like a better way to view the map, whether it's like being able to zoom out more so you can see more stuff, or just like so I can zoom my camera over while I'm charging my shot. Just things like that I think would go a long way. This is a lot to ask, but I think multiplayer would be a lot of fun. Like these crazy levels, playing that on like the GeekVerse 24-hour stream, we're all against each other, throwing power-ups at each other and stuff. Like that could be really cool. I know that's a lot to ask, but I just think it would be pretty sweet with this formula. And then another, thought I had that could be cool to mix up how I mentioned now, okay, I got to start from the first area again. Man, it's going to take so long to get through it. Oh, I don't want to do that. Like an Into the Breach approach where the difficulty definitely scales up, but I don't feel like it's by too much. So it'd be cool if you could pick like, okay, I want to go to the desert first, and then I'll come back to this area later. Right. Kind of how Into the Breach, you can pick which island you want to go to, and what one you want to do second, third, fourth, all that stuff. I think that could kind of work well here too. So I don't know if that's something they have thought about, if that would work well for the balance of the game and whatnot. But just an idea I had, I wanted to throw out there. And then my last note that I forgot to mention earlier was during the aesthetics thing. With that intro that I mentioned, that opening where you're kind of about to be the best golfer in the world, that kind of thing. It has like this CRT filter over it, and it has like the black bars around it to make it feel like kind of the old tube TV. And then it has like just this Wii Sports ass music in the best way possible that I was feeling very nostalgic. So the game like sets like the perfect tone at the very beginning that I very much enjoyed. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Curse of Golf. Do you have any other questions for me, Kirkland?
I was gonna ask on just some of the boss elements. I don't know if you're like holding that for like spoilery type talk, or just like I'm trying to picture how a boss battle would go in a golf game. It just doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, I don't think I brought it up because I don't think it's that amazing. The main difference is that you're golfing against someone else, so they're golfing as well. And then the other addition is, I guess, you're just trying to beat them to the flag is essentially what's happening. It doesn't matter how many shots you took to get there. You're just trying to get there before them. Obviously, you're taking one shot back and forth. And then they add these stun idols in there. So there's the silver, the gold, and now there's the stun idol. So anytime you hit that, it makes your opponent have to wait a turn, skip a turn kind of thing. So that sometimes it's fun, too. You can like combine. You can hit one and then set your ball up. So next turn you hit another stun ball and you just keep them stunned. And then another boss, too, and I don't know if these will evolve more in the later areas, was changing up parts of the level as we were going through it. It was pretty minor. Like, it was a cup, like 2 areas changed, like not even a screen's worth of information. Like, it was just a little tiny bit of a change. So, yeah, I don't think they're amazing. But honestly, I like the writing and the characters for the bosses. The Explorer, my nickname, is the second character. And there's a fun design. I like the look of them, and they're kind of goofy, and they have an interesting story it's a short little story, but it's fun enough at least. So yeah, I don't think the boss battles are why you'd be playing this game, but they're in there. It's a little bit of variety right on top of the other formula stuff. So, and I guess worth mentioning that once you've beaten a boss, you don't fight them again when you're going through the dungeon, when you lose and go back to the beginning. So yeah, you're also not having to do it multiple times, which once again that could be a bad thing if you want that for variety, but it could be a good thing if you're trying to speed past that first area. So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned like a want that you would have is a multiplayer element. It seems like the boss battle would be the perfect like
Sure, yeah,
situation for
yeah.
that, right? Like you just
It's set
replace
up
the
like
boss
that.
with another player, and if you just have that concept where you take turns, but you're going for the same goal, you can kind of stun each other. Like it's kind of there already. It's
Hmm.
just maybe like the like programming obstacles of like just making it like multiplayer
Yeah.
and like the
Well,
connectivity issues maybe.
I think the other thing too is you'd want to add more power up cards that like directly affect your opponent, right? Because you're
Right.
only doing these bosses every once in a while. Like none of the cards like can hit your opponent's ball away or something like that.
Yeah.
You could, I guess, you could put a portal somewhere. Maybe that would screw with them, but that's just not how the game's designed. So I think if they
Yeah.
were to add a multiplayer, it'd be fun to have a whole new set of cards that would facilitate that as well. And instead of that par system, you could take that out and it would be a race to the finish, but then you
Yeah.
could mess with each other and stuff. So I'd be
Um,
totally down to see that if they go down that road at some point.
and it just breathes so much more or like fresh life maybe into a game that like let's say you power through it and then you're playing the daily challenges every once in a while, but you don't have like a big excuse to like come back and just like actually dedicate time. But if they do have this big multiplayer patch or something, I think that would definitely again
Mhm.
like it just changes a lot of elements, especially if they incorporate like multiplayer centered cards and
Yeah.
that sort of element. Very interesting. I'm also just curious on how like the longevity of what this game's going to have. Like, is the community just going to be popping off and you're going to be seeing these crazy videos of just people like, just like absolutely just acing these courses
Mhm.
or whatnot. And so, yeah, it's very exciting time.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say too, I love the character design
Mhm.
of like the bosses and
They look so cool.
even just
Yeah.
like the whole aesthetic in general. I like your protagonist character.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just look really unique, and I feel like pixel art games just somehow capture some of the most like intriguing character designs that like I've ever
Yeah.
seen. And maybe it's because I can't like fully see them to a certain extent. Maybe it's not the best way to describe it because you do see them all, like completely, but it's not as like detailed as like a God of War character, right? Where
Mhm.
it's like, oh my god, this is like a 3D rendered image character. But then like if you just have like a hooded figure with like a blue scarf or something, and it's just like this character's so interesting because I can kind of perceive him if he would just be like a regular live action character, but at the same time I can't, and that adds a lot of like mystery and
Mhm.
intrigue to them, and it's like what made them kind of this way. I've always just been really interested in
Yeah.
like specifically like character design on pixel art. Pixel art in
Right.
general is beautiful. It's gorgeous. I know you love
Mhm.
it. But
Yeah, as an
specifically
aspiring
characters,
pixel artist, whenever I play these games, I'm always just nerding out, looking at the details, and like,
yeah.
I want to be as good as this pixel artist here. But yeah, I think part of that, and this is maybe going on a bit of a tangent, but it's just like pixel art was where games started, and there's just been a lot more time of where you were forced to do pixel art and stuff. So I just feel like in that way, like doing character art specifically for pixel art characters within games at least has been a thing that people have been doing longer. If that makes sense. So it's like
Yeah.
the people that get better and better at it and have more things to draw on as inspiration and all that. And I think with
Right.
pixel art, if you have less detail, you got to make those colors pop. You got to pick the right
Yeah.
palettes, and that goes a long way too. And there's like a bunch of the palettes in this game look awesome too for your character. So I think that's another thing as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Kirkland, thank you so much for joining me. I'm always scared of a solo cast when I don't spend the time to write a script and all that. It's something I struggle with. So I'm glad that you were down to join me on this golfing adventure. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Golf's always better with a friend, right? So this is,
It's true.
I wasn't really a golf partner. I was mostly like your caddy. I was just kind of
Sure,
watching you go
yeah.
along.
Here's your glove,
But
buddy. Yeah.
yeah, but no, it's been lots of fun just picking your brain on like your experience with this game, and I'm super
Mhm.
excited to try out the demo. I'll definitely share my thoughts
Definitely.
when I get around to trying that. Is it already out or is it releasing with the game?
The
demo?
game.
I mean, I
actually
guess the
don't know.
game's out like as
I think I saw
as
that
of
you
this
can.
recording.
I think you can download the demo on Steam when I looked at it today. So I think you
Okay.
should be able to
Cool.
right away. Yeah. All right, Kirkland, that is it. As I said, Sidequest will be back next week. Opening Night Live is, I believe, on Tuesday, so that episode should be dropping Wednesday with me, Travis, and Kirkland. You're welcome to join if you want to. If not, Roller Drome later in the week as well. So a lot of Sidequest action. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will see you next time.